Success isn't free. Hello, everyone. Today I'm bringing you a powerful story. It's great for improving your English listening skills, but more importantly, it's meant to inspire you. This story is titled Success Isn't Free, and it shows how perseverance can transform a person's life. Our story begins in the peaceful mountain town of Ridgeview, a place surrounded by tall pine forests, winding dirt roads, and the sound of distant rivers echoing through the valley. The town wasn't big, and many people lived simple lives, growing their own vegetables, fixing their own roofs, and waking up every morning to the smell of smoke drifting from chimneys. But inside this quiet place lived someone who dreamed far beyond its borders, a 20-year-old young man named Evan Porter. Evan was known for his big ideas. From a young age, he imagined owning a chain of warm, welcoming cafes, places where people could gather, share stories, and enjoy fresh pastries baked every morning. While others in Ridgeview were content with predictable routines, Evan's mind constantly wandered to possibilities, new recipes, creative business ideas, and a future where he could lift his family out of financial struggle. His family worked hard, but life wasn't easy. His father, Daniel, repaired almost anything he could: broken tractors, rusty heaters, squeaky doors, even old bicycles. His mother, Maria, cleaned offices and classrooms late into the evening, returning home exhausted, but always with a gentle smile for her children. And then there was Lily, Evan's 10-year-old sister, who followed him everywhere. She believed in him with the pure certainty that only children have. One cold evening, after a long day of helping neighbors with small chores, Evan sat outside on the wooden steps of their modest home. The air was crisp, and the wind carried the scent of pine needles and smoke. Above him, the skies sparkled with countless stars, so clear it felt like the whole universe had gathered to watch over the sleeping town. As he stared into the night, Evan whispered to himself, "I want to give my family a better life. But how do I start when we have so little?" The words floated in the cold air, and for a moment he felt small, like his dreams were too heavy for his reality. But deep inside, something pushed him, a quiet voice telling him that even the biggest journeys begin with a single step. The next morning, Evan decided to share his dream with his father. Daniel listened quietly while wiping grease from his hands after repairing a neighbor's generator. When Evan finished explaining his ideas, his father placed a firm hand on his shoulder and said, "Son, nothing in life is free. Success always demands effort, sacrifice, and patience. If you want something, start with what you have, no matter how little it is." Those words settled deep in Evan's heart. He repeated them silently as he walked away, feeling a spark of determination ignite within him. He didn't know exactly what his first step should be, but he knew he had to take one. The first step. The day after his conversation with his father, Evan woke up earlier than usual. The sun had barely begun to rise, and the mountains surrounding Ridgeview were still wrapped in a soft blue mist. The cold morning air stung his cheeks, but he felt energized, almost as if something inside him had woken up after being asleep for a long time. He walked through the quiet streets of Ridgeview, observing the town with new eyes. Small wooden houses, old pickup trucks, and dusty storefronts lined the road. People here worked hard, yet many of them struggled, just like his family. Evan knew his dream of opening cafes was too big to begin immediately, but maybe there was something smaller, something simple, that he could start with. As he passed the town square, he noticed something he had seen hundreds of times but never paid attention to: a long line of people waiting for the morning delivery truck from the nearest city. The truck brought bread, milk, and other basic foods. Ridgeview didn't have its own bakery, so everyone relied on this delivery. Evan watched as customers bought loaf after loaf of bread. In that moment, a thought flashed through his mind. What if I sold bread inside the town? What if people didn't need to wait? What if I could bring it to them directly? The idea felt small but powerful. It wasn't a cafe, but it was a beginning. There was only one problem. Evan had no money to buy bread in the first place. Still, he refused to let that stop him. That afternoon, he made a decision that both excited and terrified him. He would ask the bakery owner in the neighboring town for a chance. Not money, not charity, just trust. The next morning, Evan began his journey before sunrise. The road to the next town, Hilford, was long and uneven, stretching 5 kilometers through forest trails and rocky hills. His shoes scraped against the gravel and cold wind whipped against his face, but he pushed forward, repeating his father's words in his head. Start with what you have. When he finally reached Hilford, he stood in front of the small brick bakery owned by Mr. Graham, an elderly man known for 2 things: his delicious bread and his suspicious nature. The windows of the bakery glowed warmly, and the smell of fresh dough filled the air. Evan hesitated for a moment. His palms were sweaty, and his heartbeat thumped loudly in his ears. He took a deep breath, stepped inside, and approached the counter. Mr. Graham turned his head slightly and frowned when he saw Evan standing there. "You're not from around here," the old man grumbled. Evan nodded respectfully. "My name is Evan. I'm from Ridgeview. I have a proposal for you." The baker raised an eyebrow. "A proposal? What kind of proposal could a boy from Ridgeview possibly have?" Evan swallowed his nervousness. "I want to sell your bread in my town. People there love fresh bread, but it's hard for them to get it. I don't have the money to buy stock in advance, but if you let me take some bread each morning, I promise to bring back your payment by the end of the day. You keep most of the profit. I keep a small part." There was a long silence. Mr. Graham stared at him, his eyes sharp and untrusting. The room felt colder than the outside air. "And why?" the baker asked slowly. "Should I trust a young man I've never seen before?" Evan lifted his head, meeting the baker's strict gaze. "Because I'm willing to work harder than anyone else. And I'll prove it to you if you give me just one chance." Another silence. Then, unexpectedly, Mr. Graham sighed, deeply and heavily. "1 week," he said finally. "If you fail even once, don't come back." Evan's heart almost burst from relief and excitement. He nodded quickly. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." Little did he know, this small agreement would change everything. The first sale the next morning, Evan woke before dawn. His excitement kept him from sleeping, and as soon as he opened his eyes, his mind repeated one thought over and over: "This is my chance. Don't waste it." He bundled himself in a warm jacket and rushed out into the cold air. The streets of Ridgeview were silent, lit only by the faint glow of street lamps. Even the birds hadn't started singing yet. Evan began the long walk to Hilford with determined steps, each crunch of gravel beneath him pushing him closer to his new beginning. When he arrived at Mr. Graham's bakery, the door was already open and warm light spilled onto the sidewalk. The smell of freshly baked bread surrounded him like a comforting blanket. Mr. Graham stood behind the counter, arms crossed, eyes sharp as always. Without speaking much, the old baker handed him a large basket filled with warm loaves. "Don't forget," he muttered. "You bring the payment back today. No excuses." Evan nodded gratefully, lifted the heavy basket onto his back, and began his journey home. As he entered Ridgeview, the sun finally began to rise, painting the sky with soft pink and orange shades. Evan hurried to the small park near the center of town and set up a simple stand. Just a wooden crate turned upside down, with a basket of bread placed on top. He took a deep breath and called out for the first time, "Fresh bread, warm bread just delivered. Come and get yours." At first, nothing happened. People walked past him, some with curious glances, others with polite smiles, but nobody stopped. Evan felt sweat beginning to form on his palms despite the cold, but he refused to give up. He decided to offer small samples, tearing pieces of warm bread and giving them to passers-by. Finally, his first customer, a middle-aged woman named Mrs. Turner, stopped. She tasted a small piece, closed her eyes for a moment, and nodded with approval. "This is delicious. How much for a loaf?" Evan's heart jumped. $2, he said quickly. She handed him the money, and he thanked her almost too enthusiastically. That single sale felt like a spark of lightning inside his chest. A few minutes later, a young man bought 2 loaves. Then a family bought 3. Word spread faster than Evan expected. People were surprised to find warm bread without waiting for the delivery truck, and even more surprised that a determined young man had taken the initiative to sell it himself. Within just 2 hours, Evan's basket was completely empty. He stared at the empty stand in disbelief. His hands trembled, not from the cold, but from excitement and relief. He had done it. He had actually done it. Before going home, he counted his earnings. He needed to pay Mr. Graham the same day, just as he promised. Without wasting a minute, Evan hurried back to Hilford, legs aching but smile wide. When he entered the bakery, Mr. Graham glanced up. "You're back early," he said skeptically. Evan placed the money on the counter. "Here's your payment, all of it." The old man raised an eyebrow, surprised. "You sold every loaf?" Evan nodded. Mr. Graham looked at him for a long moment. This time not with suspicion, but with a faint hint of respect. "Be here again tomorrow morning," he said gruffly. As Evan walked out of the bakery with his heart pounding, one thing became perfectly clear to him. This was only the beginning. Building determination from that day on, Evan's mornings began earlier than anyone else in Ridgeview. Before the sun peeked over the mountains, he was already on his feet, preparing himself for the long walk to Hilford. Carrying the heavy basket of bread was no easy task. Each step made his arms ache, and on rainy or windy days, the journey became nearly unbearable. Yet Evan never complained. In his mind, every step was another step closer to his dream. Back in Ridgeview, he noticed the subtle reactions of the townspeople. Some smiled warmly when they saw him, waving as he set up his small stand. Others whispered in curiosity, "Who is this young man waking up before dawn just to sell bread?" For Evan, this quiet attention was encouraging. He wasn't just selling bread. He was building trust. The first few weeks were the hardest. Not every loaf sold immediately. Sometimes people walked past without stopping, and Evan would offer samples only to have them politely decline. At first, he felt discouraged. It was easy to imagine giving up, returning to comfort home, and pretending the bakery idea had never existed. But he remembered his father Daniel's words, "Nothing in life is free." That phrase became a mantra, repeating in his mind each time fatigue or doubt threatened to overtake him. Slowly, Evan began learning the nuances of selling. He realized that a friendly greeting, a smile, and patience could attract customers. He started remembering the names of regular buyers, asking how their families were doing, and listening to what they liked or disliked about the bread. These small gestures transformed simple sales into connections, and over time, the people of Ridgeview began to trust him. They weren't just buying bread. They were supporting a young man who had shown initiative and determination. After 2 months of tirelessly walking to Hilford and selling every loaf of bread he could carry, Evan had saved enough to buy a small pushcart. It wasn't much, but it allowed him to transport more bread at once, reducing the physical strain of his daily trips. The cart also made his stand more visible, brightly painted and decorated with simple hand-painted signs. It drew curious customers who had never approached his humble wooden crate before. One morning, a customer, a kind man named Mr. Jacobs, approached Evan and said something that would change the course of his journey. "You have a talent for selling, young man, but you could earn even more if you baked your own bread instead of just reselling mine." Evan paused, unsure. He had never baked anything in his life. The thought seemed impossible. He had always relied on Mr. Graham's expertise for the perfect loaves. But something in Mr. Jacobs' words sparked a new determination. If he could learn to bake, he wouldn't just be a seller. He could control his own product, grow his profit, and eventually expand his small venture into something greater. That evening, Evan sat on the porch with Lily, telling her about the idea. "Do you think I could really do it?" he asked her. Lily's eyes shone with belief. "Of course you can. You already wake up before anyone else and walk miles every day. Baking is just another challenge." Evan smiled, feeling a mixture of excitement and fear. Learning to bake would be harder than anything he had done before. Mistakes would come and failures were certain. But one thought echoed louder than all his fear. Success isn't free, but I'm ready to pay the price. The next morning, before the sun rose, Evan approached Mr. Graham with a humble request. "Sir, could you teach me how to bake bread?" The old man frowned, crossing his arms. "If I teach you, you won't need to buy my bread anymore. That's bad for my business." Evan held Mr. Graham's gaze firmly. "I understand, sir, but I won't forget the man who gave me my first chance. If I succeed, I'll make sure your bakery benefits too." Mr. Graham thought for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "Very well. Come at 3 a.m. tomorrow. Baking isn't easy, and it will test you more than carrying bread ever did. Are you prepared for that?" Evan's heart raced with determination. "I am." From that day on, Evan's journey became even more challenging, but also more rewarding. Each morning before dawn, he arrived at the bakery to learn the secrets of mixing, kneading, and baking. His hands ached, his muscles screamed, and many loaves failed completely. But with every mistake, Evan learned something new. And slowly, the boy who once only sold bread began transforming into someone who could create it himself. The early mornings at Mr. Graham's bakery became a ritual for Evan. He would arrive at 3 a.m., long before the first light of dawn touched the streets of Hilford. The air inside the bakery smelled of warm dough and yeast, a comforting fragrance that made Evan feel both nervous and inspired. The old man, stern and precise, demonstrated every step with a careful hand, measuring flour, mixing ingredients, kneading the dough just enough, and sliding loaves into the oven at precisely the right moment. Evan struggled at first. His hands hurt from kneading for long stretches, and his first loaves were either rock hard or collapsed into soggy, unshapely masses. He began to doubt himself. On one particularly discouraging morning, after yet another batch of bread failed, Evan sat on a stool and buried his face in his hands. "Maybe I'm not cut out for this," he muttered quietly. "Maybe I should give up." But even as doubt crept in, he remembered his father's advice. Nothing in life is free. Dreams require effort. That simple phrase echoed in his mind like a lifeline. Evan realized that every mistake was a lesson, a step toward mastery. He had survived long walks carrying heavy baskets, faced skeptical townspeople, and sold every loaf he could carry. Surely he could learn to bake. The next day, Evan returned with renewed determination. This time, he approached every mistake with curiosity rather than frustration. If the dough stuck to his hands, he observed carefully and adjusted. If the bread came out too dense, he experimented with kneading times and water temperature. Slowly but surely, the loaves began to improve. Each batch was slightly better than the last, and the pride that came from creating something with his own hands outweighed the exhaustion of early mornings. After 2 weeks of relentless practice, Mr. Graham handed Evan a perfectly baked loaf. The crust was golden, the aroma irresistible, and the texture inside soft and airy. "You're ready?" the baker said simply. Evan couldn't hide his excitement. For the first time, he felt the tangible reward of his hard work. Not money, not praise, but the master of skill he had once thought impossible. That evening, Evan returned home, eager to share the news with his family. Lily ran to meet him at the door. "Did you do it?" she asked, her eyes wide. Evan held up the warm loaf. "I did. I can bake my own bread now." His mother, Maria, hugged him tightly. "We're so proud of you, Evan. You worked so hard, and now it's paying off." Evan didn't stop with bread. He began experimenting with cookies, small pastries, and simple cakes. Every evening, he worked late into the night, testing new recipes and perfecting old ones. Lily helped by packing the pastry for sale, and Maria brewed tea to keep him awake and energized. Together, the family had become a small team, working toward a shared dream. Word of Evan's product spread quickly through Ridgeview. People marveled at the quality and taste of his bread, cookies, and pastries. Some said, "Evan's baking is better than anything we've had before." Others praised the warmth and friendliness with which he sold them. Slowly, the small wooden crate that once held his basket of bread became a symbol of dedication and excellence in the town. But just as Evan began to feel comfortable, life tested him again. A new bakery opened in Ridgeview, run by a young man named Jason. His shop was flashy, colorful, and full of decorations that immediately caught the eye. The aroma of his bread and pastries drifted into the streets, drawing curious customers who wanted to see what the new baker had to offer. Evan noticed a drop in his own sales. Fear and doubt began to creep back into his mind. What if all his hard work was for nothing? What if the town preferred Jason's fancy shop over his small, humble stand? Evan felt a familiar pang of uncertainty, but instead of panicking, he did what he always did. He observed, listened, and learned. He spoke with his customers, asking for honest feedback. "What do you like about Jason's bakery? How could I improve?" The answers were enlightening. Some admired the presentation, others the cleanliness of the shop, and many were intrigued by the creative cake designs. Evan realized that to survive and thrive, he needed to grow not just as a baker, but as a business owner. Using the small savings he had, Evan painted his cart, added colorful decorations, and began offering free samples of new pastries. He also started learning cake decorating, using library books and online tutorials to develop a skill that would make his product stand out. Slowly, people returned, curious about the improvements and impressed by the quality of his creations. Evan had learned something vital. Success was not just about talent or hard work. It was also about adaptation. Challenges were inevitable, but growth came from facing them head-on. Recognition and growth months passed, and Evan's small stand had evolved into more than just a place to buy bread. It had become a hub for the people of Ridgeview. The aroma of freshly baked bread, cookies, and pastries drifted through the streets each morning, drawing townspeople like bees to honey. Children waved as they approached, and older residents nodded in appreciation of Evan's dedication. He was no longer just a young man trying to make a living. He was a symbol of perseverance and hope. Evan's improvements did not go unnoticed. One eve, Ning, while he was closing his cart, an elderly woman approached him. She smiled kindly and said, "I've watched you for months, young man. Most people would have given up when times got hard, but you didn't. That's why we trust you and support you." Her words filled Evan with pride. He realized that his hard work had created something deeper than a business. It had built relationships, trust, and respect. The long walks to Hilford, the early mornings, the failed loaves, the countless hours of practice, all of it had led him to this moment. With the money he saved, Evan decided it was time to take the next step. He rented a small shop in the heart of Ridgeview, modest but inviting. The wooden sign above the door read, "Evan's Oven," and he decorated the interior with warm colors, hand-painted shelves, and baskets filled with bread. It wasn't as flashy as Jason's bakery, but had something the other shop lacked: heart. Every morning, Evan woke before sunrise, baked fresh bread, and prepared pastries for the day. Lily helped greet customers, sharing cheerful smiles and serving samples, while Maria managed accounts. keeping track of sales and ingredients. Together, the family ran the shop like a well-oiled machine. Evan felt a deep satisfaction, not just from the income, but from the shared purpose that bound them together. Business grew steadily. People from nearby towns began traveling to Ridgeview just to taste Evan's creations. He introduced cupcakes, muffins, and new bread varieties, learning from customer feedback to improve constantly. Even Jason, the new baker, became a competitor that pushed Evan to refine his skills and expand his offerings. But life, as Evan had already learned, never stopped testing those who dare to dream. One stormy night, as he was locking up the shop, he noticed smoke curling from near the oven. His heart raced. Rushing inside, he saw that a small fire had started, fueled by an electrical fault near the old equipment. Without hesitation, he grabbed buckets of water and managed to control the flames, but much of his baking equipment was ruined. The next morning, word spread quickly through the town. Concerned neighbors came to check on Evan. Some whispered, "Maybe this is the end of Evan's bakery," while others shook their heads sadly. For a moment, Evan felt the weight of despair settle on him. All the hard work, all the mornings waking before dawn, all the failures he had overcome, would all vanish in a single night? Then he remembered everything he had already accomplished. He thought of his father's words, of Mr. Graham's lessons, of Lily's bright eyes filled with belief, and of the countless customers who had smiled at him with trust. For the first time, fear was replaced by determination. "This is just another challenge," he said to himself. "I've faced struggles before. I will face this one too. I won't give up." Evan began planning immediately. He inventoried what equipment he still had and calculated how much money he could spend to repair or replace the damaged tools. It wasn't enough, but he refused to wait passively for a solution. Instead, he reached out for help. He visited Mr. Graham, now retired, who listened patiently to Evan's story. "What would you do if you were me?" Evan asked, desperate for guidance. The old baker smiled, a twinkle in his eyes. "You already know the answer," he said. "Work harder, believe in yourself, and people will notice. Help yourself first, and others will want to help you too." Inspired once again, Evan returned home. He began baking with the few tools he had left, producing smaller batches of bread and pastries for his loyal customers. Word spread quickly of his perseverance. Moved by his courage, townspeople donated ingredients, time, and small amount of money to help him rebuild. Volunteers helped repair the shop, clean the space, and prepare for reopening. For the first time, Evan felt that he was not alone in his journey. Rebuilding and community support the days following the fire were some of the busiest and most exhausting of Evan's life. He rose before dawn as always and began baking with the small, partially damaged equipment he had salvaged. The first batches were uneven and imperfect, but he refused to let frustration take over. Each loaf and pastry became a symbol of his resilience. The townspeople noticed immediately. They arrived at the shop early, asking if they could help in any way, bringing ingredients, tools, or simply offering encouraging words. Evan realized something important. When someone works tirelessly and refuses to give up, people want to support them. They are inspired by effort and determination. Slowly, Ridgeview became more than just a place where he lived. It became a community willing to fight alongside him. Lily, now older and more confident, organized a small system to help package bread efficiently. Maria stayed close to Evan, managing inventory and accounting meticulously, ensuring that even the small batches they produced were accounted for properly. And Evan, the young man who had once struggled to make a single sale, found himself coordinating a team, his family and friends, working together to rebuild not just a bakery, but the trust and excitement of the entire town. Word of Evan's perseverance spread beyond Ridgeview. Local newspapers wrote brief stories about the young baker, who refused to give up after a devastating fire. People from neighboring towns began coming, curious to meet the young man who had rebuilt his business with nothing but grit and community support. Each new visitor was another chance to share his story, another reminder of why he worked so hard, and another step toward fulfilling his dream of creating a thriving bakery. Months passed, and the shop slowly regained its former glory. The walls were freshly painted, shelves lined with baskets of bread, cookies, and pastries, each loaf carefully labeled and arranged. Evan introduced new items, including cupcakes, muffins, and specialty breads inspired by recipes he had learned during his early days of experimentation. He added a small corner in the bakery for children, with tiny tables and chairs where families could sit and enjoy treats together. Evan's Oven was no longer just a shop. It had become a warm, welcoming space of the community, a place where people could gather, share, and celebrate life's simple joys. One crisp morning, as Evan prepared the first batch of bread, the mayor of Ridgeview arrived at the shop. Standing in front of the freshly painted sign, he shook Evan's hand warmly. "Evan," he said, "you are an inspiration to our entire town. You've shown us that determination, hard work, and courage can overcome even the toughest challenges. You're a baker. Why isn't just a place to buy bread? It's a symbol of hope." Evan felt a wave of pride and gratitude. He looked around at the bustling shop, at the smiles of the townspeople, and at his family working alongside him. Every challenge, every setback, every early morning had led to this moment. He addressed the small crowd that had gathered, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "Thank you, everyone. You've supported me through every step of this journey. Nothing in life is free, not success, not respect, not love. Everything must be earned through hard work, patience, and persistence. Even failure is not the end. It's a lesson, a step toward something greater. Never give up, even when the path seems impossible." Evan's words resonated with everyone present. From that day forward, Evan's Oven became more than a bakery. It was a beacon of hope, a place that reminded everyone in Ridgeview and visitors from beyond that determination and perseverance could turn dreams into reality. Despite all of this, Evan knew his journey was far from over. He still wanted to expand, reach more people, and create opportunities not just for himself, but for others who dared to dream. The fire had been a test, but it also strengthened him, teaching him the true value of resilience, community, and unwavering dedication. Triumph and lessons learned as months turned into years. Evan's Bakery, now affectionately known as Evan's Oven, grew beyond his wildest dreams. People traveled from neighboring towns and even distant cities to taste his bread, pastries, and desserts. The warm wooden interior, the inviting aroma, and the personal attention he and his family gave each customer created an experience that no flashy bakery could match. Evan had built more than a business. He had built a community hub, a place where life's small joys were celebrated every day. Evan's success was not instantaneous. It was forged from early mornings, long walks, countless failed loaves, and the relentless determination to improve. Every mistake he made was a lesson, every setback an opportunity to grow stronger. From his first small sales at the park to the overwhelming support after the fire, Evan had learned a truth that would guide him for the rest of his life. Nothing worth having comes without effort. Success, respect, and love must be earned through persistence, courage, and hard work. With the bakery thriving, Evan began thinking beyond Ridgeview. He wanted to create opportunities for others, just as Mr. Graham had given him a chance when he had none. He hired local youth, teaching them baking skills, customer service, and the value of discipline and responsibility. He organized weekend workshops for aspiring bakers and even started a small scholarship fund for students in Ridgeview who dreamed of opening their own businesses. Every loaf of bread, every cookie, every pastry was more than food. It was a lesson in determination and generosity. Evan also never forgot the lessons of competition. Jason, the young baker who had once challenged his small shop, became more of a partner than a rival. The two shared tips, collaborated on special events, and even co-hosted seasonal markets. Through collaboration, Evan learned that success wasn't about defeating others. It was about improving, sharing knowledge, and elevating the community as a whole. The most important lesson Evan had learned, however, was the power of belief in himself and in others. He had started with nothing but a dream and the trust of one elderly baker. Over time, his relentless work ethic and integrity inspired an entire town to believe in him and in the power of effort and perseverance. When setbacks occurred, like the devastating fire, Evan discovered that asking for help was not a weakness, but an opportunity for connection. People wanted to help those who refused to give up on themselves. One quiet evening, as Evan closed the shop after another successful day, Lily came up to him, now a bright and confident teenager. "Evan," she said, smiling, "you've done more than sell bread. You've taught this whole town how to dream." Evan looked around at the warm interior of Evan's oven, the empty baskets that had once been filled with fresh pastries, and the small handwritten notes from customers thanking him for his service and kindness. He realized she was right. He hadn't just built a bakery. He had built a life full of purpose, respect, and pride. He took a deep breath, thinking of his father's words all those years ago. Nothing in life is free. Evan smiled, understanding fully for the first time. Success wasn't about luck or talent alone. It was about courage, effort, learning from failures, and never, ever giving up. Evan's journey had started with a simple dream, to help his family and make life better. In the process, he had transformed himself and everyone around him. He knew the road ahead would still have challenges, but now he faced them with confidence, experience, and the knowledge that anything is possible for those willing to work for it. And so, Evan's oven continued to thrive, standing not just as a bakery, but as a symbol of hope, determination, and the extraordinary power of perseverance. The story of Evan Porter became a legend in Ridgeview, reminding everyone who heard it that while nothing in life comes free, everything is possible with hard work, patience, and an unyielding spirit. The end.